Good evening and welcome to the NDTV Dialogues, a conversation of ideas which move away from strident political positions. On the NDTV Dialogues this evening, we look at moving beyond the LOC, the lines of conflict between India and Pakistan. Joining me tonight, Professor Stephen Cohen, Dr. Sanjaya Baru, Dr. Brahma Chellaney, and Asif Noorani. Thank you all very much for joining me tonight. Professor Cohen, your new book talks about the fact that the India-Pakistan dispute is amongst the world's most complex and sharply disputed rivalries. You talk also of the fact of this being an intractable paired minority conflict in a sense, and the way forward, there are many options, but it's very unclear how the next years will unfold. Given the current context, we see the hostilities increasing on the line of control, killings of Indian soldiers, the sharp step up even after a democratically elected government came into Pakistan. What do you see as possibilities in the future for greater engagement between the two countries?
Well, I think that remains an option, and the book discusses at some length the desire to have normal relations. I don't call it peace, but normal relations, which would include no shooting and other exchanges and so forth. But I spent, I'd say, 50 years working on the book, 2 years to write it, but 50 years studying India and Pakistan. And I'm cautiously pessimistic. That sums up my attitude. I don't see this moving forward very quickly or very far. On the other hand, I don't believe that there's going to be a major war. I think nuclear weapons make it impossible for India and Pakistan to have a major war. So the military strategists talk about what we talked about with the Soviets. How do you fight a limited war? Well, a limited war in South Asia means you're going to be attacking cities. So I think that war is not ruled out, but it's improbable. Peace may be improbable also. So I think we're going to see an oscillation between normalization process, 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps sideways. I think this is the future for South Asia. It's exactly like the Israeli-Palestinian dispute. One of my colleagues at Brookings, Martin Indyk, is the special negotiator for that, and he faces these kinds of problems in that region.
Dr. Chellaney, you've been much more scathing in recent articles, calling the current leadership weak, impotent, directionless, and pointing to the crucial factor of what you see also as stepped-up attacks by both Pakistan and China along Jammu and Kashmir. Yet you feel that strategically the leadership has failed in recognizing this or coming up with any viable answers to this?
I think the policy drift on Pakistan, to be fair, has been an ongoing affair under successive governments. The foundations of this policy were actually laid by Atal Bihari Vajpayee between 1999 and 2004. His policy in Pakistan changed with every season. There was a new policy in Pakistan every winter and every summer. His policy traversed through, let's be clear, through Lahore, Kargil, Kandahar. Then we had the attack, then came Agra, then the attack on Parliament, and finally it culminated in Islamabad on his second trip to Pakistan as Prime Minister. It was a roller coaster ride on Pakistan. He didn't have a consistent policy. And for example, he had this Operation Parakram in 2002, where he put the Indian military on war readiness for 10 long months. And the then Navy chief later described it as the most punishing mistake ever inflicted on Indian armed forces. Without achieving any objective, he ended that operation. Now, but for the Vajpayee roller coaster, Manmohan Singh wouldn't have had the political space to do what he has done. We have had a series of major terrorist attacks under Dr. Manmohan Singh. And one has to ask the question, is our policy inviting this kind of aggression? Are we presenting India as a weak and a tempting target? I thought that one of the lessons that we should have learned from the Mumbai terrorist siege was that we were staring at the bitter harvest of our own mismanagement of the Pakistan policy. Unfortunately, the same trend has continued. Every new attack is just more water under the bridge for the government. But that's not a Pakistan policy. Being nice with a determined adversary in the hope that it will change its behavior is not strategy. Under successive governments, India has mistook tactics for strategy. It has treated the process of engagement with Pakistan as an end in itself, forgetting the end objective, which is to end cross-border terrorism.
Dr. Baru, is that an achievable objective? Dr. Brahma Chellaney points to the fact of how successive governments have failed in having any kind of Pakistan policy. You worked very closely with the Prime Minister in his first term when we had two major steps taken. One was, of course, the inclusion of Baluchistan in a Sharm el-Sheikh statement. You had the delinking of dialogue and terrorism, which many attacked the Manmohan Singh government for. In hindsight, when you look at what the current situation is, many attacking the Prime Minister for pursuing what they say is a dream of a personal legacy of trying to establish some kind of peace with Pakistan, something many in the government themselves don't agree with.
Well, I think that's the easiest argument to dismiss. There is no dream of any personal legacy here. People keep saying that Manmohan Singh wants to go to Pakistan because he wants to visit his place of birth in Gah. I can tell you he has no particularly pleasant memory of his childhood in Gah. It's a God-forsaken village. His mother died when he was a baby. His father was never in the village, was traveling. He lived a very unhappy childhood. It was only when he came away to India as a youth that he lived a normal life. So all these psychological theories are utter nonsense. I think the important thing to recognize is that both India and Pakistan, I don't actually agree with the analogy of Israel-Palestine. I think India and Pakistan in many ways are a sui generis situation. We are two large countries. Pakistan is among the top 10 countries in the world in terms of population size. We are both nuclear powers. We are both viable sovereign entities. We have to find a way to live together. There is no option. There is the idea that people say the United States should go out and bomb other countries. The United States has not bombed any of its neighbors. It goes across the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific and bombs countries very far away from it. Pakistan is next door. And any Indian leadership is duty bound to find solutions. Those solutions may not work. Those solutions may be half solutions. One can criticize them. But there is a bounden duty of any Indian political leadership, not just Mr. Vajpayee. Before him, Narasimha Rao tried. Before that, Rajiv Gandhi tried. Indira Gandhi tried. Successive prime ministers, successive prime ministers have tried, and it is obligation on the part of the Indian Prime Minister to try. You can't criticize him for trying. You can criticize him for not trying enough, or for going on the wrong direction, or for giving away too much, etc., etc. I mean, one can get into the details. But the overall strategic objective of seeking normalization of relations, an Indian Prime Minister has no option. Having said that, I think the important thing that we in India should recognize in the political discourse is that neither Pakistan nor India are homogeneous entities. There are internal differences. There are internal differences within societies. There are internal differences within governments. I mean, you talk about people within the government not agreeing with the Prime Minister. There are people within the Pakistani establishment who don't agree with their leadership. Pervez Musharraf did not have the support of all his army generals and other political leaders in the initiatives he took, coming to India, etc. There would be internal differences because all the time everybody is calculating, one, what are the political gains for me if this guy fails? Two, what are the other paths that have to be kept open in case this path doesn't work? So we are dealing with a very complex relationship in which there are multiple actors, and I agree with Steve that the 2 steps forward, 1 step backward, that's the way in which this relationship might move. But every time we take those 2 steps forward, I think the test of leadership is to see how much you can delay that 1 step back or how you deal with that 1 step back. And the classic example is 26/11. It was one huge step back after the many steps forward that were taken by Pervez Musharraf and Manmohan Singh between 2004 and 2008. They changed the fundamental premises of the dialogue. The formula that they were discussing about the resolution of the Kashmir issue was a completely new development.
Yes.
And that has been put on the table. I mean, successive governments have not been able to take it forward, but it lies on the table. Then there was this Mumbai attack, and that of course had a huge negative impact. And we have tried to slowly walk back from that. This will be the process in which this dialogue will go, and hopefully at some point in both countries there is adequate recognition that it is in our individual interest, it's in Pakistan's interest and it's in India's interest for some kind of a modus vivendi between 1.5 billion people of the subcontinent.